Hi, welcome back to Storytime with Dave Booker. We are on the last two chapters of this book, so I appreciate you being here. Hope you have enjoyed Soleman Rogues Gallery. The next book we'll be reading on Tuesday will be book 4 of Sheriff in a Small Town, probably the final chapter, so I'm not too sure what we'll be doing next after that. But let's finish this one up. This one is the last two chapters, The Problem of Servants and Victor Vanquished. So Frederick was becoming restless, waiting for them to emerge. As far as he was concerned, the members of the household were rich aristocrats, perhaps a bit cleverer than others, but of their ilk. But to his knowledge, they would be cowards and unarmed. How little he knew of the occupants he waited on. Ray looked over the field and told Oldibus to make his way to the tree on the right-hand side of the door. From there, you'll be able to see inside. I don't know if the maid is one of them, but the cook surely is. He's Randolph Morgan. His specialty is throwing knives. Oldibus was busy buttoning up his coat and lowering his hat. Exiting from the driver's side, he slowly and silently went from shadow to shadow, making his way invisibly to the tree. Harry felt the time was right for causing a distraction. Rolling down the window, he questioned Frederick. Hey, Frederick, what's with the gun? Did you hear a robber or something? Frederick changed his aim, directing the barrel at Perry. No, I heard a dangerous group was headed here. I was going to eliminate them all. Perry sat back and melted into the darkness. Ducking down, he pulled the back of the seat forward. A gaping hole led into the rear. Sharon understood and crawled into the safety of the trunk. Perry left silently and stealthily out the left-hand door. Frederick reached beside him and pulled out a flashlight. Aiming the brilliant beam into the limo's interior, he saw it was empty. His cry of rage brought out Randolph. Frederick might have supposedly been in charge, but that did not mean that Randolph answered to him. You idiot! How can they have escaped you? You were just talking to them a second ago. Frederick's flashlight shone over the grounds, flashing everywhere. Up, down, around the grassy lawn, he sought to find the four. Flying missile from somewhere knocked the flashlight from his hand. A heel tossed with great force rendered his hand numb. He fired the gun to a wide barrage, hoping to hit someone. Didn't matter who. Randolph grabbed the pistol. Stop being an idiot and wasting ammo. You can't hit them. When they disappeared so easily, I realized who they are. The head guy is Soleman, and the other is Flats. He reached down, feeling around, found the solid heel. Yeah, this clinches it. Get into the darkness yourself while you reload. I'm going to reconnoiter. Going into the house, he turned on every light near a window, then lit the porch lights. The grounds were illuminated all the way to the sidewalk outside the iron gate. From the safety of the doorway, he called out, Soleman, you don't have any shadows now to hide in. You might as well give up. From the ground beneath the portico, a patch of black still remained, a triangle of darkness from the top of the porch to the grass. It was small and narrow, but enough that it hid Persephone, or as she was formerly known, Pussyfoot. Soleman emerged from the rear of a tree with arms raised. I'll give myself up, but let my friends go. Randolph had a knife hidden by his arm. With a small flick of the wrist, the knife was sent on its way to Soleman. At the same time, two slender hands reached up and pulled Randolph by the heels, sending him tumbling backwards just as he threw the blade. It hit a descending branch instead of its intended target. On the other side of the porch, hidden behind a column, Frederick had reloaded and was aiming for Soleman. Oldibus emerged from a short distance behind him and threw the bola made of shoelaces and a weighted heel. He wrapped around Frederick, pinioning his arms when they descended, his arm lowered and the tightened laces cut into his body. His hands dropped, but the force of his wrist hit a nerve and the gun fired into his leg. With a cry of anguish, he fell to the ground. Oldibus, Persephone, and Perry gathered together. From an upper floor window, a shot was fired. In the bright lights from the house, they were all easy targets. Jogging for cover, several shots barely missed the intrepid trio. In the limo's trunk, Sharon heard everything. She slowly opened the latch that allowed the trunk to open from the inside. Her dark dress and long black hair blended with the limousine. Approaching the railing, close to the house, she was hidden from the upstairs window view. She edged to the front of wall and windows until she was near the open door. Rushing inside, she could hear the sound of whizzing missiles from outside as Periodopus struck lights and attempted to strike the hidden foe. Sharon reached the landing on the first floor and looked carefully into every front room. So the maid remaining to be accounted for. And that she was partially correct. Of the household, the staff, there remained only her. But hidden away was a person who had arrived earlier to give the message that all who lived there were to be eliminated. Sharon paused past the table loaded with vases, flowers, and miscellaneous objects. She pulled the flowers from the vase and emptied the water into a larger one. From the main bedroom, she saw the maid kneeling in sharpshooter stance, firing outside. Sharon crossed her fingers and flung the vase. Struck the wall next to the maid, who wheeled and fired as Franklin knocked Sharon down. She was dropped out of the way of the impending death. The bullet found its mark in Franklin. Mary Constance was a hardened criminal as much as the rest. She rose in frustrated anger at striking the wrong person. Flying heel struck her on the shoulder. She was turned by the force of the missile and fell out of the window, landing stunned on the lawn. Persephone made a quick tour of the house. Upstairs, she found Franklin wounded and Sharon unconscious. A first aid kit was somewhere within a short distance from multiple rooms. She found the one recessed in the wall near the bedroom. Patching Franklin with speed, and she then applied a cold compress to Sharon's neck. Under the cooling influence, she woke slightly, confused. Is everyone all right? Persephone nodded. Well, everyone except for him. Sharon looked at Franklin without recognizing who he was. That was intended for me. Where's Mary? Persephone rose and helped her to rise. She's outside on the lawn along with the rest. From the window, they heard the scream of sirens and saw the flashing lights. Persephone was angry. Hell took them long enough. Persephone rushed into the bedroom, emerging dressed but hurriedly as though she had been getting ready for bed and woken. All the invaders, former servants, were packed off to jail. Podolsky was ushered into the living room where full explanations were given. Podolsky was grateful the only ones hurt were the aggressors. Harry finished with, well, Franklin worked for the owner of the Victorian, and these others were placed here by him to keep an eye on us. We weren't quite imbued with the Victorian spirit, and they have been chucked from membership. I guess because we knew too much was why we were slated to be put on ice. I appreciate you folks coming by and aiding us. Podolsky was modest. I admit our aid wasn't much. It looks as though you, in the dark, these all started firing on each other, thinking they were you. Persephone was half lying in her chair as though the effort was more than she could stand. Sharon was enveloped in Oedipus's embrace, who was looking tenderly on her after her ordeal. Harry wore a mask of indignation that someone would dare to invade his home and threaten him and his friends. Podolsky patted Perry on the shoulder. I wouldn't worry too much about being kicked out of that club. A friend of mine is doing his best to shut it down. I understand that plenty of bad things happen there, but nothing we could arrest them on. I doubt they'll be in business much longer. Harry nodded, knowing how well he was justified in that belief. Periodopus set the place to rights as Persephone and Sharon fixed a substantial meal. After all their exertions, they were all hungry. Seated in the dining room, they ate and relaxed. Persephone noticed that Perry was constantly looking at Sharon as if trying to decide something about her. He eventually rose from the table and went to a hidden cupboard. Placing an object in his breast pocket, he rejoined them at the table. When the repast was finished, Perry took Oedipus to another room, handed over the object and explained his intentions. Otis requested the honor and approached Sharon. My love, for heroism in the face of danger, risking your life and safety in the call of action, you are now officially part of the team. With great ceremony, you place the mask over her eyes. Your team name will be Kittenfoot. Sharon blushed, but was pleased to be fully part of the team at last. Harry went to see Thomas and have his hair regularized. The area he had to cut had made a slight bald patch, and he wanted a new style that would cover it. As his hair was cut, he handed Thomas a note from Soleman explaining that Thomas hand the Victorian information to Perry. Thomas passed over the typewritten sheet of paper. It had the names and addresses of all 15 couples. All the members of the club were accounted for. Perry had his hair rearranged and paid for his haircut. Feeling back in control, Perry and Oedipus set about contacting each pair and deprogramming them. Persephone and Sharon worked on the rehabilitation. The men who had been married before were informed of their wives' current locations and were placed in contact with a counselor in Perry's employ. For the women who lost their husbands, they too would need assistance. The people who had been deprogrammed were encouraged to attend the dance coming in 2 weeks, with the promise of retribution on the people responsible for so much misery. They were not only ready to attend, but eager. Perry brought the limo around, not only ready to, and took all that wanted to go to the Nightingale mission. In the office, Soleman explained the final mission he would undertake on their behalf. Madame Nightingale turned out the light and waited by the door. She intended to attend the final meeting of the Victorian Club. Driving back to the mansion, she was silent. Perry tried to engage her in small talk, but she sat staring straight ahead. Once home, Perry and Oedipus went into the kitchen to prepare a sustaining supper. There was work to do that evening, and they wanted to ensure enough calories for what needed to be done. When they came out, there was no one in the front room. Perry and Oedipus scanned the rooms and stopped at the staircase when the sounds of footsteps were heard. Madame Nightingale led the procession in an evening gown of flawless cut. Persephone and Sharon were similarly dressed, though not so finely. Tonight was Madame Nightingale's time to shine. Her face was hidden behind a black veil. Perry held out his arm to her as she reached out the last step. Oedipus escorted the other to table. Seated at the head of the table, Madame Nocturn served herself, but seemed reluctant to eat. Persephone understood her reluctance and placed a hand on her gloved arm. You are amongst friends here and have nothing to fear or hide. With trembling hands, she raised the veil. Looking around, she saw nothing but warm friendliness. No one was repulsed, no one was shocked. She felt comfortable for the first time in many years. Sharon was curious. Madame Nightingale, I know you understand that many of the ladies in your mission were once members of the club. Since you were never a member, why do you want to be there? Is it as a representative for them? Many are going to be there as well. Madame Nightingale smiled with warmth reserved for an innocent young lady who she felt tenderly towards. Well, it's true I was never a member of that club, for which I am exceedingly grateful. However, I was Victor's first wife. You have seen him and know how handsome he is. He's also intelligent. We had many interesting talks over a wide range of subjects. He was a great reader in psychology and the Victorian era. Combining both interests, he focused on the works of Freud, Wundt, James, and Bain. We began to model our lives on the Victorian period. It was fun playing dress-up and walking the streets in costume. Seeing that other people would stop us and ask questions, we began to act accordingly, even in our privacy of our own home. He allowed me to run the home and place the servants under my care. I must admit, I found it fascinating to be running a household and doing the budget as well as managing the servants. At the time, we had 5, and I learned to create a truly Victorian home. Over time, the game palled on me, and I searched for other diversions. Victor was determined that the Victorian model was the ideal and that he would remain a Victorian man and would expect me to act accordingly. Well, the game was over for me, and I began to return to my interest in chemistry. One day, when I refused to go out with him in costume, he became angry. I was his wife and should obey his every whim. I locked myself in the laboratory and continued my researches in discovering a neutralizing agent for sulfuric acid. I found that I had friends in the textile industry who used it extensively with sometimes disastrous results. I was hoping to find a solution that would immediately alleviate it or dilute it in case it splashed on someone. It's only recently that I discovered a solution that works. Once I publish, the industrial process in textile and farming will be much safer. She smiled with pride, and her eyes gleamed at the thought of the benefits her work would accomplish. Well, while I was working in the laboratory, Victor came in, raging that my duty was to do as he told me. I reminded him that we were living in the 20th century and the woman was no longer her husband's property. His anger was such he became unreasonable and lashed out at the beakers and vials on the table. I was splashed to the point you see me now. I doused myself with water from a sink in the lab. Now it stopped further burning, but the pain was such I passed out. Seeing me scarred and marked for life, he snapped out of his rage and wrapped me in a blanket, and he took me to the hospital. He sold the house and left me everything he had, all his money, bonds, and such. With the funds I had, I began the mission and took the women who had been abused. Eventually, I was confronted with another woman who had been and had a similar experience. She was badly marred and asked to live in the mission. Soon others followed, and I realized Victor had rebuilt his life. He was using his interest to lure other couples to the Victorian mode of living. Well, I believe you know the rest. I wanted to see me as I am, not as a scared woman who he left little better than dead, but a woman scarred, but proud. One with true friends and people I care for and who care for me. I, of course, count you all amongst them, and thank you for your hospitality. They finished eating in silence and closed with a small brandy toast to the success of their mission. Departing, Madame Nightingale placed the veil once more over her face. They drove to the club in the Treadnought and waited in the darkness. Couples arrived and went in dressed for the dance. One of us arrived with a limo which was full of ladies from the mission. They were dressed appropriately for the evening, but everyone had their faces veiled. The reckoning was to happen at the reception. As the line progressed, Victor and Marjorie began to feel something was wrong. The handshakes were getting firmer to the point they were hurting. The faces were stern. The line surged in and surrounded the couple. The women from the shelter stood behind the group, circling Victor and Marjorie. Soleman and his retinue came in last. A tap on the shoulder, and the group parted so that Madame Nightingale could approach them. She took Marjorie's hand and passed her over to Persephone. Take her out. She is blameless and has been under Victor's control. Victor heard the voice, and memories began to stir. The voice was familiar, but harsher than he had ever heard it. The inner circle spread out, and the mission ladies stepped forward, encircling Victor. Madame Nightingale closed the distance so that she was all that was in Victor's line of sight. She slowly peeled off her gloves. Her arms were revealed, scarred and withered. She bared her shoulder, showing the damage he had done. Victor's conscience broke the walls down he had built around his memories. His hands went out towards her. She stepped back. Slowly, she removed the veil. Victor stared in horror. Florence! Her name came out in a choking scream. She stepped back and raised her hand, pointing to the women surrounding him. You know and remember the evil you did to me. Now see the evil you have done to others. The women raised their veils and let fall the shawls from their shoulders. The sight of so much destruction on women once so beautiful was more than he could stand. The women closed ranks so that they were all he could see. He stared in horror, seeking somewhere to look that was not named. A terrified shriek and groan escaped his lips, and he collapsed in a heap on the floor. Perry gently moved Florence out of the way and examined Victor. He was dead with a look of terror on his face. The mission ladies stepped outside. Some waited for their husbands who had abandoned them and now sought them to bring them home. Women who had thought themselves married were taken to retrieve their belongings and would seek temporary shelter at the Nightingale mission. Perry found all that was taken from the men in a safe. Fortunately, it was all in envelopes with their names on it. The money was given to the fugitive wives. Perry wanted to do more, but Madame Nightingale explained that he had done enough, and now she would do whatever remained for them. From the office, Soleman called Podolsky to collect the remains of Victor Manfred. Nearby, he deposited the books that told of the deeds accomplished by the Victorian Club. Marjorie was deprogrammed, and once she was cognizant of who she was, she asked to be returned to her family home. She had been abducted by Victor when she was 20 years old, and she was now 24. 4 years of her life lived in a fog of awareness. She refused the envelope Soleman offered her. She entered her home to rebuild her life. And that's it for Soleman Rogues Gallery. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you listening in and having heard Soleman. Hope you liked it. That's the last book that is in the series. We have one more book of Sherman's Sheriff in a Small Town that we'll be reading on Tuesday. So I hope you'll be here. I look forward to seeing you again. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening in. Be good and be good to yourself. Bye.